Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to deploy a function app with a blue-green deployment model. So in short, we're going to create an additional slot while provisioning a function app, deploy the function code, and swap the slot on demand. So over here is my project folder structure. Sandbox is my root folder, and underneath that, I've got two folders called Terraform and SRC. So the Terraform is to keep all the Terraform files, the configuration files, the template files, and SRC is nothing but my source folder to keep my application code. That's chunk of code to run the functions or to deploy the functions, right? So this is my folder structure, and imagine a developer is going to do the remote push to the branch stating that they have made some changes. If the changes is being identified under the SRC, the pipeline identify the changes in the SRC folder. So it's going to deploy the source code to my slot in my development slot. So exactly you can see that over here, the blue slot is a development slot. Okay, so that's going to deploy the source code function. And if the pipeline identifies the changes underneath the Terraform folder, it's going to create the infrastructure. So that's going to be the resource group, an application function app. Okay, that's a production slot. By default, it is created. It has an app service plan and a storage account. It creates a function app with a default production slot, app service plan, and a storage account. And also, it creates an additional slot called development or staging, but it won't deploy any source code if changes is identified only in the Terraform. If the changes identified in both the folders, it creates an infrastructure and then it deploys the code. If the changes is only in the source folder, it's going to deploy it in the development slot. Consider I didn't do the infrastructure provisioning and trying to do a change on source folder and deploying it, it fails. But that's okay. This is just for a demonstration how to do the swap slot through the CICD. And here is what exactly you see the configuration for the swap slot. I have a variable called swap slot, swap underscore slot. And if it's set to S, that's going to run a command and swap the slot from blue to green and say like, hey, I'm production ready now. And these slots sits in the app service plan. We don't pay for the slot, but we pay for the app service plan we provisioned. Let's see that in the action. Let me quickly go to my code. This is my pipeline YAML in GitLab CICD. So I've got a couple of variables called environment, QA. That means you can name whatever you want, and it's going to be the prefix for the resource group or function app or whatever the resources I'm going to provision. Sorry, it's going to be a suffix. Okay, so I've also defined a TF address variable. This is just to make sure that I have a HTTP remote backend to store my Terraform state file, and it's going to store in the GitLab. The slot name and the swap slot. The slot name is staging. You can go ahead and change it to blue, green, whatever you want. For now, I just name it as a staging, and the swap slot is set to no because I don't have a function app up and running. I've got a Terraform commands here. So first I do the Terraform init in the before script. So I don't have a different stage for the Terraform initialization. I'm doing it in through the before script, and I have a template for that. I'm just calling this template everywhere so that it knows that I have got that initialization happening there. So I've got a Terraform init with a remote backend, with a remote HTTP backend. Okay. So I've got my TF address variable and TF username and the password. These values are set in my GitLab group, or you can set it in the project as well. It's not a problem. So now that I'm running a Terraform validate, just to run the Terraform validate to see everything is going good, I'm running out of the quota. So I have created my one private runner that's on my local box. So I've named it as CV Sandbox 1983, and it's going to run on my local machine. So the before script also authenticate to the Azure using my service principal name. So if you're good at PowerShell, using Azure PowerShell for your administration, you know what I'm doing here. I'm just establishing the connection to the Azure, and I'm just making sure that I have a permission to create the resources. So the SPN what I'm using here has got a contributor permission on my subscription. So once the validation is done, I run a plan with a couple of variables so that I pass my resource group name, location, storage account name. All these set of variables are part of my group or a project variables. A couple of things have been defined it over here in the YAML template itself. So here my resource group name will be RGP dash. It concatenates with the function app name, which is defined in my variable over here, and then the environment. It's as simple as that. And then also I have the app slot name. The app slot name is going to be a staging or a development, whatever you define it here. Simple. Then I do the Terraform apply, clean, and then I just go ahead and do the Terraform deploy. So sorry, the deploy over here is not actually the Terraform deploy. This is going to be the functions deploy. So until here, it's going to pull up the infrastructure and then say like, this is how your infrastructure is going to be. You have one resource group created, and then you have a storage account, function app, and an app service plan, and then a slot. And I create a new slot, a Windows function app slot. Okay, so that will be taken care until once the apply stage is completed, right? Then comes is the deployment, where I just go ahead and do the ACCLI command line to come into the picture, to log into the Azure, and then to publish the Azure function and say, here is my source code. I'm not doing a zip deploy or a lot of APIs and other things to call. Pretty simple and straightforward. I call the ACCLI to log in just to make sure that I have an authentication. And also, I just make sure that I'm going to call the function core CLI to publish the Azure function in the defined slot. Over here, it is going to be my staging slot. Simple. So now what I do is, I don't cover the swap slot for now. Let's quickly run the pipeline. I just want to make sure I have a couple of changes done. Deploy QA environment, and I just do a commit and push. So what exactly it does? It will trigger a pipeline. Let me see what exactly it does. Yeah, it started the validation. It will do the plan, apply, and then deploy. So the apply stage will quickly go ahead and create the function app infrastructure for me, and the deploy will go ahead and deploy the code which is available underneath the source folder, and it will make sure that iGetEmployee API endpoint is available through the slot which we defined, through the staging slot, but not through the production slot, production instance. Okay, let's see how that works. So we need to wait for a couple of minutes for the job to complete. It will take approximately 5 to 6 minutes. The reason being is, once the apply is completed in the Terraform, I made a start sleep of 150 seconds. So I just want that buffer time to make sure that function app provisioning is completed and settled down so that I can publish my code. I can do it in a better way, but not now, sometime later. So now that I have covered, I'm using the Azure PowerShell command line, the Azure PowerShell commandlet from the AZ module, and I'm using ACCLI, and I'm using function core app core CLI. All these three tools are available in my box because I'm running it in my private runner that is on my local box. If in case you want to run it on your on the shared runner and you want to call the image, very well you can go ahead and remove the tags, and then you can use your own image name here. It works. It works like if the tools are available in that particular image, it will definitely work. If you are using Bicep, very well you can use the Docker image for Bicep and then run the Bicep command lines. And similarly for ACCLI as well. Or you can build your own Docker image, hook it up to the registry, and then you can pull the image and make use of it. That works too. So now the validation is completed. I don't see any issues in it. Right next, I just want to see the plan. I shouldn't see any issues in the plan job. Perfect. Let me see if I have any issues in apply. This is provisioning the infrastructure, if I'm not wrong. Yes, it's creating it. Let me go to my Azure portal and access the resource groups to see if I can see the deployment progress. Obviously, I can't see the deployment progress because I'm spinning up in the Terraform. I can see the QA environment here. It has created app service plan, function app, and the storage account. The remaining is a slot, app slot. So let's see how this is going to provision the slot. Okay, now that it's completed the process, the deploy process, deploy of Terraform. I don't want to get confused. The deploy, the apply is nothing but your Terraform deploy. Okay. So now that I've got all the resources created, so underneath the staging, I don't see any functions for now because the deploy job should get succeeded. And if I'm not wrong, it's in progress. It will have a wait time of 150 seconds as I showed earlier. Right. And pretty much neat and clean. I've got all the resources, whatever I have defined in my main.tf. Right. I've got a resource group. I've got a storage account, app service plan, a Windows function app, a Windows function app slot. Right. So I've got a resource group, app service plan, function app with production slot. I've got an app, Windows app function app slot, and a storage account. Pretty much simple. So what is the configuration for this? So the configurations remains intact because I didn't do any changes for the app slot, production slot, and the staging slot. Let me quickly see that. So I've got a couple of configurations. I think the same thing should be available for um, the staging slot. If I'm not wrong, the slot name should be staging, right? All right, it should be staging. Let me go to my function app. Sorry, let me go to the resource group and I make sure that I have my staging slot, the instance is up and running with a different URL. So if you see that, it has a micro API -QA staging.azureWebsites.net, wherein in my function app, it should not be with -staging. Good, excellent. Let me go to my pipeline and see. Okay, I see some error here, but that's okay. I can ignore it. It's all about the artifact. Let's skip that. So now the AC login is success. I can log into I can see the records for the login, and also I can see it's waiting for uh, the publishing the function. But I made start sleep command to execute for 150 seconds. That's okay. Now that it started executing the function core CLI to publish the function app with the source code folder, it is in SRC, and also it has a slot name. The slot name is going to be the staging, right? Excellent. Now you see the URL is available. The deployment happened on the staging instance. So that's why I see micro API -QA staging.azureWebsites.net /API / I get employee. Okay, let me copy the link address and try to access this API. I should see the result here. That is good. It's trying to get this result back for us. The body name is Chen, ID is 1, whatever it is. Excellent. So I get the desired result. If I go to my resource group again and I see my staging, I should see the functions here. Wherein if I go to my production slot, I should not see that, right? So I go to my production slot and I go to the functions. I don't see any functions underneath it. That's pretty much I want. So now I know this endpoint is working fine. Consider that testing team or a QA team who just say that I'm signing off, you're good to go and swap to the production. So now I go to my pipeline and say I'm good, please do the swap. Coming all the way down, just to make sure that I have all the settings in swap slot as desired. So it's going to run when I'm going to set the variable to S. So this condition is satisfied. And it's going to log in again to AZCLI and then through AZCLI, and then it's going to do the function app deployment slot swap. I've given the resource group name, the function name, and the slot name. And the target slot is production. The source slot is going to be my staging slot. Let's see how this works. Let me quickly go ahead and say like swap to production and then commit and push. So this is going to start a new job in my pipeline. Good. I see that it started and running. So you can see you have used 402 out of 400. That's okay. Ignore that. That's why I'm using a private runner. And it's pretty much simple and straightforward. What you can see here is a pipeline which is pretty much simple and straightforward. A developer push to the remote branch, and then the pipeline triggers, and then it is going to start deploying it to the staging slot, creates the infrastructure, deploy to the staging slot, and then swap it on demand. Okay, so let me see what exactly it's doing, and don't want to get the notification pop up. Now that it's taking some time here, pretty much simple, and it's going to start the swap. It prints ready to swap because I just did it in echo. And now you can see the command is executing. That's to um, make sure that a source and a target is set right and the swapping is done. Now I can get the result saying job is succeeded, but I'm not really sure. Let me come to my resource group and access my micro API QA, and I see the functions should be available here. That's great. That's really fantastic. So now let's just do another game over here. If I try to access this function, code test, let me try to get the function URL. Okay, it's just doing something like I don't want to worry a lot. I can go to my swap slot and see. Okay, this is my staging URL. If I remove the staging URL, I should also access the production link. This is loading, and yes, I see the result. But I get same result because it's an identical instance now. I did a swap. Now what I need to do is I need to add another function just to make sure I did the right level of testing and my rules are working in my pipeline. I need to demonstrate both, right? So I just come back here to my YAML file and say my swap slot no. And then I go to my source folder. I get employee and I say like I just make a slot to differentiate it. Format the code. I did a change only underneath my source folder and another change is in my GitLab.yaml. So what happens now? The deploy runs, only the deploy stage runs. Deploy new code to staging slot. Commit and push. So now I have done a code change. That deployment will happen only on the staging slot. If I access the production URL, I get a different set of result. But if I access a development URL, a staging URL, I get a different result. Okay, let's test that. Now that a pipeline job should have been triggered. Yeah, it triggered. I think the deployment is started. I should have removed this, but that's okay. It takes 3 minutes, approximately 3 to 4 minutes to do the deployment. And there is no swap slot job created. So we are good. That means it's going to do the deployment in the staging slot. So let me keep the URL ready. Let me open up a notepad. I'll just zoom in. Okay. So I've got one URL. That's my production URL. Hyphen staging is going to be my staging URL. So let's see that. If I go to my deployment, okay, let me go to the previous pipeline. This is for the swap slot. Swap slot. It's for the deployment. I just want to grab the URL quickly from there. Okay, so I just take the URL. This is my production. This is my staging. So all I have is dash staging. That means it's a different instance altogether, and I get a different set of result for this and a different set of result for this. Let's see that. Still my pipeline job is not yet completed. The deployment is not yet completed because it waits for 150 seconds. That's okay. Let me keep a incognito window open. So I'm accessing a production URL. So when I'm accessing the production URL, you see I get name, ID, country, city, but I'm not got the slot because in the code I have defined an object called slot here, a property called slot here in my PS custom object. So this is not available in my production URL. And the same is applicable for the staging because the deployment is not yet completed. Let's see that. Let's see how it's progressing. So it's approximately 2 minutes and 44 seconds, but it should take another 30 to 40 seconds to complete the deployment. So once the deployment is completed, I should be able to access the staging URL from the incognito window, and I push enter. It's doing the deployment, and I think the site is not up. Yes, it completed it. I haven't got the URL. Let's see the URL. Okay, it's not going to be the staging, it's going to be a QA. That's good. So I copy the URL and I come to my incognito window and access the QA environment. You can see from my staging, I see a new property called slot. But from my production, I don't see that. Excellent. Now what I do, I just quickly go ahead and say like, yes, I can see the slot. QA team says things are good. Please go ahead and do the swap. So I quickly go to my pipeline, YAML file, and say like swap slot S, scroll down all the way down just to make sure things are good here, and say swap to prod demo, or whatever, just demo, and then commit and push. So now if I move back to my production and I try to refresh it once the deployment is success, I should see the slot property. Until that point of time, I don't see the slot property here. Let's see how that is going to perform. I just want to see the pipeline job status. The swap slot is up and running, but the deployment is not yet started. Now that we have got an identical configuration, but I've demonstrated it how the rules from the GitLab CICD works, and also how to do the swap slot with by just by changing the variable. We can also do the automation, end-to-end automation, by checking out the values for the blue and green, or how to toggle it. No doubt about it, we can have a regression test, the postman test, whatever we do, to connect the endpoint, get the result, and then do the changes. um, but depends how you're going to set up your pipeline. It's all about that. So now back to my function app in production, and I go to the functions. I see I get employee still, and I don't see the, okay, the job is succeeded now. So that means I get a swap result, and if I go to my incognito window and do a Control F5, I see the slot staging. It's as simple as that. If you have any feedback or comment, please feel free to share it with me. That would be a great help. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching my video.